tall nail gets the hammer. Chinese proverb. Chapter 3. Yearning Forever. Do you know anyone that does not want more out of life? Is there anyone that is content with things just the way they are? Even the Dalai Lama and Buddha and Christ spent their lives teaching and contributing to the evolution of others because of some yearning to change things for the better. We are all automatically committed to evolving, being better and better at being. The reason we yearn perpetually to improve things is because of the force of evolution, a close cousin to the force of gravitation. Gravity is a force that we know exists because we experience its pull. It is an invisible force that pulls on things that have mass so that they experience weight. There is a similar force working in our lives. I call this force evolity. It must exist because we experience evolution. It pulls on living cells so that they experience a yearning to improve, in the same way that gravity pulls on all things with mass so they experience weight. The human condition is one of yearning. For the rest of our lives, we will yearn to evolve and improve ourselves and everything around us. We will yearn to make a greater contribution. For those of us who have a mind for technology, this force of evolity is directly related to gravity. In the same way, electricity is directly related to magnetism. We know that if you pass a magnet through a coiled wire, it creates electricity. Similarly, the force of gravity pulls on living creatures like a magnet, creating a current of life force that results in a yearning for evolution. So, no matter how successful you are, as long as there is gravity, you will yearn for more. Think about it, and you will find that you cannot name a single person who does not want more from life than what they already have. Even enlightened sages are working day and night for things like world peace or spiritual quests. We might as well face the fact that we will forever yearn to make a contribution. Although we have fantasy movies that portray living happily ever after, this is perhaps one of the worst concepts introduced to humanity. One day we will live happily ever after, and we will arrive and be complete in life. That poses a question. What do you call the completion of life? I call it death, and I don't know about you, but I am in no rush. Why make yourself wrong for always wanting more? It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to master the art of self-evolution. Life is an experience, no more, no less. So you might as well make it a meaningful, fulfilling one. The difference between a happy person and an unhappy person is that the happy person feels he is making a contribution to forward evolution. This is not giving or assisting or supporting. When Mother Teresa held the dying man, she did not try to save his life or fix the problem that made him poor. Mother Teresa had one desire: to give compassion. She gave him what she yearned most to give. She contributed to him and to many others. This is the richness of life, to be a contributor, and it is the opposite of changing or fixing something else. All for the experience. Everything we do for the experience, not for the results. And we are happiest when we experience making a huge contribution for which we are rewarded. Rewards are the feedback to us that we are evolving. The reason so many people want money is because they think that lots of money means they've evolved. True evolution is not proven through results, like making great sums of money. True evolution is being able to create great experiences at will. Learn to create great experiences, not results. 93% of million-dollar lottery winners claim that within a few years they are worse off for winning the lottery. Rewards without contribution can be disastrous. We yearn to be better, but because we mistake the means for the end, we think that instead we want more. Since everything I do for the experience, why not use my most rewarding experiences to guide my life? Can you think of something that you do for a reason other than to have the experience? You might say, I don't pay my taxes for the experience. Okay, don't pay them, and you go to jail. We pay our taxes for an experience called freedom. We are happiest when we experience making a huge contribution. Human beings are contribution organisms. Think back to a time in your life when you were supremely happy, when you were making a huge contribution. What we really yearn for is to make a contribution and reap rich rewards. The greater the contribution, the richer the rewards. The goal is not to get more, but to become more, to be better at making a contribution. Then the rewards come naturally. It is in contributing the thing for which we most yearn for that we receive it. This is a paradox. It doesn't make sense, but we recognize intuitively that it's true. If you want sympathy more than anything else, become the source of sympathy, and you will experience sympathy. If you most want confidence, make it your job to make someone else feel confident. When you are most in need of affection, be affectionate. I believe that the yearning for things like sympathy, kindness, and confidence is actually the soul trying to communicate to us to give those gifts, not receive them. If we misinterpret this yearning, we become needy and wanting. The alternative is to become a wellspring by being the source of those experiences for others, calling them forth from the inside out. In answering the soul's yearning for sympathy by giving sympathy, we become the source of sympathy and fully immersed in the experience for which we yearn. How else can the soul call us forth to give its infinite gifts except by our yearning? Don't trust me, test me, right now. What are you yearning for right now? Compassion, understanding, a hug, to hear the words, "I believe in you," whatever it is, turn to someone now or pick up the phone and be that for others. It is a choice, and not even a hard choice. All you have to do is choose it and act, in spite of your reasons. As you are reading this, you may be thinking, that's pretty obvious, but doing it is a different story. I have a little phrase I like to repeat when I'm sluggish: choose and go. Okay, so let me tell you a story about a person who was reading this book and decided to conduct an experiment because I challenged them to stand up wherever they were, alone or in public, and throw their arms in the air and yell, "I love my life." What about you? What if you did this right now? Just put down the book, stand up, throw your arms in the air, and yell, "I love my life." Most readers wouldn't do it, because most readers are more worried about the message they are giving to others than the message they are giving to themselves. Those who do this simple exercise have a totally different experience of this book and of their lives. Right now, you can pretend you know what it's going to be like, but you don't. You can reason all you want, or you can stand up now and do it. The longer you wait, the more you confirm that experiencing life is not as important as understanding it. The choice is yours. Don't think, just choose and go. Throughout my childhood, I had a funky poster of a cartoony old man on my wall. It read, "A man there was, they called him mad, the more he gave, the more he had." You will notice throughout this book I avoid using words like help, assist, give, support, and serve. In order to help someone, I must first assume that they are helpless, and I am just not willing to sell people out like that. People are amazing, and given the invitation, they will usually rise to the occasion. I have asked my mentors and some very wealthy people this question: does it help to give people money? And they all agree it does not. In fact, it debilitates them. If you've learned the hard way, as I have, by lending friends and relatives too much money, you will never do it again. This may sound heartless, but it has been my experience that the heartfelt pain that comes from offsetting a relationship by lending money to loved ones is far worse than the salve of charity. It is disempowering to give people money, because in order to do so, we have to stop believing in them and their abilities to create what they need for themselves. So instead, I look for something valuable in people and ask questions that invite them to call it forth. My favorite quote is by Shakespeare: "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." And that is just one of the five senses, not to mention the sixth sense, intuition, a close cousin to one's experience. So the most valuable things in life are only valuable because of what is inside us that we are projecting out onto those things. Take a pen, for example. If you hold it up in front of a group of people and ask, "How much is this pen worth?" One person says $1.50, another says 79 cents, a third says 50 cents. Why the discrepancy? Because although they are seeing the same object with the information that comes to them from the outside in, they are painting that object with whatever they hold to be valuable, being projected onto the pen from the inside out. In this respect, your eyes are not just receptors, they are also projectors, just like projectors in a movie theater. We spray everything we look at with whatever is most meaningful to us, and then judge the thing or person as if it has or lacks value. Things do not have value, and people are just being people, not good people or bad people, just people. Conditions are basically neutral, and beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, or perhaps more accurately, inside their heart. From outside in to inside out. If living from the inside out is far more fulfilling than living from the outside in, why is it that we do not do this naturally? The answer has a lot to do with money. My definition of money is a value container. Money holds value, and when we trade money for products, we are trading the value in the money for the perceived value in the product. What would happen to corporations if their marketing departments began promoting the concept that we could be totally self-fulfilled from the inside out? What if they stopped making us think and feel that without their products we would not be fulfilled? What if they told the truth, that value is not actually in the object they are selling you, it's in you? The simple fact is, the more a company can convince us that there is value in its products, the more it can charge for these products, and the more profitable it will be. And what would happen if our religions taught us that the kingdom of heaven actually is inside us, like the scripture says? What if our pastors, ministers, rabbis, gurus, popes, monks, nuns, and shamans are not actually liaisons between us and God? What if there is no middleman? What if there never was? Isn't that the message that Christ and Krishna and Buddha and all the great saints and sages brought to us? But that message is just too good to be true. So what usually happens is that these great men and women attract followers who write a book about them. Then the followers, instead of living their own greatness, put all their efforts into selling and defending the book. I think I'll get back to a less volatile subject. Fortunately, each corporation or religion gets to choose its approach to marketing. Do you remember the old car commercials? They showed a picture of the car and said things like, "The new Ford Zoomer comes with a 900 cubic inch engine, power windows, and a large trunk." Nowadays, they have 60-second action adventures with an impossibly beautiful woman having a semi-orgasm at the wheel driving across a lake with silver water streaming off her hair. Then they just show you the company logo over a black screen. Marketing companies have finally learned that there is only one thing people really value: fulfilling experiences. So now that's what they're selling. Marketing has evolved from, "Here are the features and benefits of our product, you determine its value," to, "Without this product you will be worthless and afraid," to, "This product contains value, so if you want to be fulfilled, you need this product," to, "This product is the experience you are seeking. Buy it now." The customer is always right, because the customer is where value resides, not in the product or service. Consequently, the value of our contribution to others can only be measured by them. That is why there is no substitute for market surveys, asking your customers what they most value. No matter how much time we spend creating fantastic products, services, flyers, websites, and ads, without direct feedback from consumers, value cannot be determined. The best relationships occur when the customer greatly values the product or service, and 2, the salesman loves the experience with the customer. Make no mistake, Despite what marketing wizards tell you, getting more stuff is not the same as getting more fulfillment. Fulfillment comes from the inside out, not outside in. When you get clear on who you are at your core and what your contribution is, making your contribution will give you that fulfilling experience you seek. And then the rewards will come. Stuff will be optional. What we're doing here is using the law of cause and effect to our advantage instead of our deficit. If I make a contribution everywhere I go, the universe has to find a way to reward me. But if I'm always needy, begging, borrowing, and looking for a deal, the forces of the universe are obliged to find a way to make me pay for all my discounts and perks. It will take what I owe. This is what is meant by the scripture, "For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath." True stories. What happens when we wake up? Communicating beautifully. Tom, a minister from a local church, had to see me somewhat under the radar because churches aren't savvy about ministers going to a life coach. He said he was feeling dry and needed to get clarity about the path he was on. I asked him, "What would have to happen for you to know that you're on the right path?" He said, "I hope this doesn't sound showy, but I have always wanted to have a standing ovation." It didn't sound showy to me. It sounded like he wanted to give his audience a fantastic experience. I've worked with many speakers over the years to empower them to deliver riveting presentations. Tom and I identified that his heart virtue is connection and acknowledgement. Then we discussed his presentation style. Whenever someone is struggling with clarity in their lives, communicating beautifully who they are refreshes their vision of themselves and other people's vision of them. Communicating beautifully with others usually includes these 4 elements: telling meaningful stories, sharing quotes from people that you really admire and who inspire you, 3, leading others through experiential exercises, and 4, asking important questions. To help him get clarity about what he most wanted, I led the minister through a visioning process. Starting with the end in mind, I said, "Imagine yourself giving this keynote presentation, and you are at the end, and everyone is cheering and on their feet. What is the last thing you said that was so amazing that put them on their feet?" He said, "That would be a story I recently read about a little girl." I said, "Okay, now tell me what is it that you say right before that story that would lead beautifully to it." The minister sat before me, almost in a trance it seemed, and quoted a passage from the Bible. Then I said, "What comes before that?" He replied, "A personal story of when I was with my grandfather." We worked our way all the way back to the beginning, where he imagined himself walking into the chapel and standing at the lectern. I said, "This Sunday, give this presentation." He was hesitant, saying, "I don't usually use that style." I asked him, "How's that working for you?" So he tried it. He said in the first presentation he gave, he got resounding applause, but it wasn't a standing ovation. So he came back and we honed it, and the second time he gave it, he got a standing ovation. This minister's heart virtue of connection and acknowledgement awakened him to how he could make a greater contribution, and he began doing it from deep within his core. Although it was important to start with what was most meaningful to him, we also started with the end in mind. Not the end result, but focusing on the experience he wanted to create. Soul's Path. Another client of mine, Glenn, had been a rock musician. Years earlier, he wrote a song that made it in the top 10, and his band toured for a year. At the time I met him, he was very depressed, on medication, and selling can openers for a living. We discovered that his heart virtue is inspiration and self-expression, and he realized that he had gotten sidetracked from his soul's path. He began to write songs again in his spare time. He created a vision for himself and began making phone calls to people who inspired him. I explained that inspiring people are those whom he admired, people he wanted to be like, not people that made sense to call just because they had money or power. In a short time, This man had accepted a contract that paid him 2 years' salary up front to write songs. He called me 2 years after his first session and said, "I want to thank you because I know what I was born for. I feel so complete I could die tomorrow without regrets." Living for the present and the future. Jan, the mother of Christine, the 19-year-old girl I mentioned earlier, came to me concerned, among other things, about her dwindling business. She sold marketing services and had not been able to successfully expand her business. Jan learned that her heart virtue is bringing out the best in others. By using a tool I'm going to tell you about in a minute, she was able to triple her business within a month. Many of my clients have used this tool, which requires no extra time or effort, yet it often triples their results because it makes use of a very powerful law of quantum physics involving time. In a study done at the University of Liverpool in England, several dozen students were asked to go out and inconspicuously listen to people's conversations to find out what most people are talking about. The study revealed that 66% of all conversation is gossip, and 75% of all conversation is about the past. Let me ask you a question. Can you change or improve the past? No. This means we're getting 100% of our results from 25% of our conversation because we don't get future results by reviewing the past. We get results through productive, courageous conversations about the future. So I said to Jan, "How much time do you spend in a sales conversation?" She told me that she spent about 1 hour and 15 minutes in each sales conversation. I asked her, "What kind of results have you been getting?" "Average," she said. "What do you say to prospective buyers?" I asked. Usually in these conversations, she asked the individual about their relationship with their previous marketing person, what kind of results they got, how much they are used to spending, etc. "That's all about the past," I said. "Ask them what they want to accomplish with their marketing. What does that look like? Where do they see themselves in 2 years? Finally, what they would do if they were making a lot more money." Once they answer these questions, design a marketing campaign to fulfill that vision and don't talk about the past at all. She was skeptical, so I said, "Okay then, try it for 1 month, and if it doesn't work, you can go back to what you were doing." She called me in 3 weeks to say that she had 3 times more work in 2 weeks than she ever had in a month. She said, "I'm spending 15 minutes with clients, and they all want to sign up because all I focus on is their future." As this woman began to focus on the future, she was able to contribute through her heart virtue of bringing out the best in others more effectively. Remember, the value does not exist in the product. It exists in the customer who buys the product. We become turned off when people try to sell us something we don't value. But if they can find out what we most value and what we most yearn for and get committed to delivering that, we'll buy it. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Man descends to meet." Chapter 4. Tribes and Blind Spots. At this point, you may have had the thought, "I think I already know what my heart virtue is." Or, "Why do I need Greg Morse to help me see my heart virtue? Why can't I do it by myself?" In this chapter, I'll explain why I have not yet seen a single person identify their own heart virtue, because it is hidden behind a psychological blind spot. I hope you are at least a little suspicious. Let's face it, if our knowing ourself and our heart virtue can really galvanize our life, why hasn't this process happened already? Aren't you wondering, if heart virtues exist, why weren't we taught about this in school? The answer discloses something devious and infuriating. Before we are even able to understand words, our programming begins. We are indoctrinated with a very important set of rules. We will learn a skill set for survival. First priority is physical survival, followed by social survival skills. Learning to look good and fit in. At birth, There is nothing more important than us. But within 2 years, we learned that there is nothing more important than our tribe. Most of us live in a self-prescribed range of perceived acceptance, a comfort zone, that keeps us in the mediocre strata of our lives. We live our lives within the average range because truly magnificent lives make other people uncomfortable. Our tribes will do whatever it takes to keep us alive, yet they will also discourage us from sticking out. Throughout childhood, there is one word children hear more than any other word. It is no. The second most common word is don't. So we learn at a very early age that we can't have the things we really want. It would be great if 2-year-olds could respond with, "Excuse me, I realize our beliefs are different, but I'm having more fun than you, so why don't you back off and try saying yes more often?" But they cannot. So they assume there is something wrong with them for having fun and for having independent desires. Eventually, we become blind for the things we want the most. A tribe is a group to which you belong because you follow the spoken and unspoken rules of the group. The first tribe we belong to is the one we are born into, which is our family. A common rule in any tribe is don't stand out. Go along to get along. And above all, don't be selfish. We learn right away the importance of self-sacrifice. The second tribe we join is school. The tribe of school trains us to sit down, shut up, and get back in line. Every time we stood up and said, "This could be incredible," others rolled their eyes or told us to sit down and play it safe. We learn that there is something more meaningful than what is most meaningful to us. Remember that? How painful it was to have our ideas rejected. Between the ages of 5 and 10, we developed our own inner voice that keeps us from doing what is fulfilling to us. It becomes unbearably painful to have our most ambitious ideas hammered down over and over. Eventually, we decided that we would be more successful if we did not provoke resistance or repression. And a very special part of our brain that is specially designed to avoid pain kicks into high gear, and we begin to develop psychological blind spots toward anything that would make us stick out. The very nature of a tribe is that the individual members of the group are asked to sacrifice what is meaningful to them for the betterment of the group. Here's a question I like to ask people. Where is your life on a scale from 1 to 10? 0 means I'm ready to commit suicide, and 10 means I am in blissful ecstasy all the time. If you're like 95% of the populace, your answer is a 6, 7, or 8. When I ask large audiences of 1,000 or more the question, there are less than a dozen who say that their life is a 5 or less, and there are less than a dozen who say their life is a 9 or 10. Everyone else is 6, 7, or 8. The next question I ask is, when those people who said that their life is a 9 or a 10 raise their hands, how many of you had a little voice in the back of your head that said one of these things? They're just kidding themselves. Yeah, right. Who do they think they are? It won't last. Stop bragging. Or the final, well, aren't they special? Most of the group will admit that they share this sentiment. There it is. We are now fully equipped to go out and fit in. This confirms for me that we all have an unspoken agreement that life will be safely mediocre. If we tell those of our tribe that our life is a 3, they will lift us up. And if we tell them it's a 9, they'll pull us down. So there is a comfort zone between 6 and 8, and our tribes do their best to keep us there. After a while, we do our best to keep ourselves there. If we spend our whole lives doing everything we are told, we will likely end up lying on our back in a convalescent home wondering what life should have been. So we seek to make more of ourselves, to become powerful enough to break loose from our tribes. There are 3 ways that human beings try to become empowered. 1. Solo. This is the cavalier, maverick crusader who usually gets crucified by the tribe. 2. In a group. As we discussed, The mechanics of groups makes individual empowerment difficult, if not impossible. 3. One-on-one. Historically, this is the way it works. Mentoring. It is the wizard, guru, mentor, savior, or coach's guidance that leads to heroic empowerment. Once we get clarity about who we really are at our core, our heart virtue, we are ready to seek a mentor to guide us through the process of creating a life of contribution. In fact, at every point in our life, whether we have total clarity or not, we learn best from one-on-one mentoring. Why is it then that we go to enormous high schools with thousands of students? At the very point in our life when a mentor and guide is pivotal, we merge into throngs on a daily basis. Our tribes have trained us to fit in and live a mediocre life. A guide and mentor who would allow us to recognize our true potential in life is a threat to the tribe. We all have developed what I call blind spots in our psyches. Whenever we take a stand and stick out, our tribes make it so painful for us that our brain, which has the prime objective of surviving and avoiding pain, develops blind spots so we can no longer see what is most meaningful to us. We've heard the saying, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Yet if you stay out of the kitchen too long, you starve. Most people are starving for something more meaningful in life. We can live incredible, meaningful, fulfilling lives if we make up our mind to break the tribal agreements to live a mediocre life that are built into our psyche. 80% of America's workforce says they would rather have another job. Nearly 2/3 of American marriages end in divorce. We have all tried to find a new job or a new relationship, and we often end up in the same place because we're seeking outside-in fulfillment. Have you ever noticed that wherever you go, there you are? We cannot escape ourselves. So let's start being honest about what is most meaningful to us as an independent individual. Risk is the fuel of life. Without taking risks, we take the greatest risk of all, living a life far below our potential, a life that is mediocre and unfulfilling. I read of a study in which people on their deathbed were asked if they had any regrets, and here are the most common answers. Number 1, I wish I had spent more time in reflection. 2, I wish I had taken more risks. 3, I wish I had left something of lasting value behind. 4, I wish I had said I love you more. And 5, I wish I had laughed more. These are the biggest regrets that people have. Do you know what the 3 greatest fears are? If you stop 100 people on any street corner in America and ask them what their greatest fears are, the most common answers will be, in order, 1, public speaking, 2, peer rejection, and 3, untimely death. And if you ask them about their greatest wants or desires, they will be, in order, 1, recognition, 2, change, and 3, security. And here's what's fascinating. Consider how these 3 fears relate to the 3 greatest wants. Number 1 greatest fear, public speaking. Number 1 greatest want, recognition. Number 2 greatest fear, peer rejection. Number 2 greatest want, change. Number 3 greatest fear, untimely death. Number 3 greatest want, security. It's funny, but our 3 greatest wants are most powerfully fulfilled by facing our 3 greatest fears. It seems bizarre to me that the fear of untimely death is so low on the list. Whenever I'm working with someone who is in survival mode, fearing death, I say, perhaps I can clear something up for you. You are not going to survive. Life always ends in death and usually ends painfully surrounded by a lot of sadness. So, now that that's out of the way, what would you like to do with the next few decades? It's not that I take life for granted, but I take death for granted. The reason I'm writing this book is because I greatly value human life. In working with my clients to discover and act on their heart virtues, I insist that they do nothing dangerous. Risk does not mean facing physical dangers. Risk means facing your fears, and there are many fears that are not dangerous. Remember, the number 1 fear is public speaking. Have you ever heard of anyone dying at the microphone? Or lose a limb or scream in pain? This particular fear is very suspicious. The fear of public speaking is actually not a fear at all, but rather a misinterpretation of excitement. We are afraid that we'll have a profound impact. Because let's face it, if you stepped up to the microphone and said something so beautiful and profound that you received a standing ovation, you could no longer pretend that you have nothing important to say. In the case of public speaking, we are afraid that we might step out of our mediocrity and show up as magnificent. And if we do that even once, we would probably never be the same again. Pretty scary, huh? Or is it pretty exciting? The choice is yours. Marianne Williamson, in her book A Return to Love, says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That, I believe, is why public speaking and peer rejection are greater fears than death. Metaphorically, facing these two fears is a kind of death. Death of our mediocre self as a new heroic self is born. I like to call our mediocre self our weenie, the tribal coward that refuses to take harmless risks in order to experience a more fulfilling life. Giving up our weenie and stepping into our hero happens naturally when we admit to ourselves how much we really do care about our lives and about others. When we are finally honest about how much we really do care and befriend our hero self, our connection with our weenie self weakens. Though we are more fulfilled, we mourn the loss of our old conservative friend that held us back. Just as an ex-alcoholic misses his old drinking buddies at first, so do we miss our tribal buddies until new relationships with mentors, humanitarians, and philanthropists are established. The grieving ends quickly once these new and more meaningful relationships are established, simply because they are so much more rewarding and fulfilling. Finding fulfillment. Have you ever sat down and asked, what fulfills me most in life? Why do I get goosebumps at certain deeply fulfilling experiences? And how can I create those on a daily basis? Perhaps you're a corporate executive, and you want to expose people to the beauty of nature. You may hear a chorus of tribal voices saying, you can't do that and make a living. Ignore that voice. Listen to your own voice. There is a way to express the passion of your soul and still be rewarded, if you take the risk. I am not suggesting that you leave the work you are doing now or leave your unfulfilling relationships. Let me illustrate the difference between being and doing with a story. I generally work with people in one of two areas, career and primary relationships. A woman named Amy came to me because she was miserable as a junior manager at Kmart. The company was in Chapter 11. We took an inventory of the most meaningful experiences of her life, goosebumps and rage experiences, and we discovered that she was committed to leadership and teamwork in her very molecules. For her, fulfilling the call of evolution meant being great at teamwork. So she said, well, I guess I need to leave my job and you'll help me find a job working in a better environment where there's teamwork, right? No, I said, I won't commit to help you leave your job. But if you go in there so passionate about teamwork that they fire you, I'll work with you to find a better job, okay? For the next week, I asked her to use the word teamwork in every conversation she had. She did this, and eventually someone approached her and said, look, if you are that passionate about teamwork, we have a staff meeting on Friday. Will you take 30 minutes and do a presentation on teamwork? Amy had never done a presentation like this before, so she frantically called me for direction. I told her that powerful presentations included 4 components: inspiring personal stories, favorite quotes, interactive exercises, and meaningful questions. I sent her to the library to find some stories and quotes. She called me on the way home in tears. "I just read 3 books," she told me. "You must have really found some good stories and quotes." "Yes," she said, "but I just read 3 books." Now I was wondering, that was the homework, I said. She sobbed, "You don't understand. When I was young, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I can't read, and I just read 3 books." What happened? Her passion was sufficient to overcome her obstacle. Her presentation at the staff meeting was so successful that she got a promotion to senior manager. In her next session, we played with removing all restrictions, and she created a powerful vision born out of her commitment to leadership and teamwork. She said, "Greg, I'm great at recognizing people who are good at teamwork, and if I was in a position to hire managers and place them throughout the company, teamwork is the one thing this company needs. That's why it's in Chapter 11. Everyone is out for himself, afraid to lose his job." I said, "Well, the position you're looking for is executive recruiter. Why don't you check with upper-level management and see what's available?" It turns out that they were just hiring a senior executive recruiter for the Western Division. She had very little experience or credentials, so she was quite worried about the interviews. Instead of sending her in with her resume, I suggested that she share her vision. She did share her vision, and even though the other applicants were more qualified, she got the job. Fortunately, the person who interviewed her recognized that personal passion and commitment was more important than credentials. The point I'm making here is that we are the source of what we want in life. If we realize this and stay committed to what is most meaningful to us, we become a contribution monster, generously giving our gift wherever we are. I'm asking you to get curious about how you are being so that new doors will open for you. There are many forces of nature that will work in your favor. Notice that in this story about Amy, she worked in a one-on-one relationship with me to realize how she really wanted to be. I believe that one-on-one relationship is pivotal to pushing through mediocrity and becoming who we are meant to be. Finding a mentor we admire puts in place a process of inspiration and empowerment that causes us to begin contributing our heart virtue to the world, attracting projects, people, and opportunities that will forward our life's work. The Roman philosopher Seneca said, "It is the proof of a bad cause when it is applauded by the mob." True stories. Stepping away from our tribes. Our tribes are responsible for most, if not all, of the resistance we experience when we go through the 3 steps of the Heart Virtue program. These are: 1. Identify our heart virtue. 2. Learn to communicate it beautifully. 3. Take small acts of courage to make a contribution. Often we get peeled away by our tribes or tribal habits. Consequently, only a small percentage of us get to fully experience the power of our heart virtue. This is because the tribe has programmed us so deeply that they now block us from the inside. When we learn to recognize the tribal voice inside us and differentiate it from our own voice of heroic contribution, we see who we really are and who we are not. Our tribes programmed us for mediocrity so completely that these habits are not easily broken. Yet stepping out of our tribes happens effortlessly when we identify something more meaningful to us than social survival. This is the true gift of knowing one's heart virtue. It tells us who we are authentically, as defined from the inside. Once we know who we are, we often make the mistake of setting out on a crusade to share our newfound enlightenment. When Christine found her heart virtue of empowering women, she was so excited about what it did for her, she set out to zealously enroll her friends. She was so fired up at the results, she got the idea that she was going to take control and transform her tribe. Whoops! She gave up drugs and alcohol and went out partying. She drank seltzer, not alcohol, with her friends thinking, I'm going to change them. When Christine shared her heart virtue with her partying friends, she learned rule number 1 here at Life Camp. Never share our dreams with people who don't have the power or resources to make them come true. She shared her dreams with a bunch of teenagers who didn't have any power to make her dreams of empowering women come true. So what did they do? Naturally, they pulled her down. Fortunately, at the same time, Christine was courageously calling people who inspired her in the world. These people supported her vision and ultimately allowed her to move beyond the mediocrity of her tribe. And that is rule number 2 here at Life Camp. Share our dreams every day with one person who has the desire and the resources to make them come true. What happens when we find that sharing our vision with our tribe just doesn't work? We see that we are not getting anywhere because these people don't have the power and resources to help us get to our vision. We're at a fork in the road. We are asking this question: am I going to keep living my life the way I have been, knowing my heart virtue but not expressing it? In which case, the heart virtue will fall behind the blind spot again in about a week. Or, am I going to use what works, which is one-on-one mentoring with the people who inspire me? This is the formula for personal empowerment that has worked for thousands of years. A kind of death. When we start living in alignment with our heart virtue, we're entering a new paradigm, and something and someone is going to die. That someone is that old familiar friend who keeps us safe and has no interest in stepping out and being incredible. When we step into our heart virtue, the fulfillment comes with grief. Grief for the loss of old relationships that don't work for us anymore, and the loss of our old self that doesn't work anymore. Our old survival self will kick in during times of danger for the most part. However, it's on the back burner. It's like moving away from our family to the East Coast from the West Coast. We grieve losing them. They are absent from our life, but they are still there. The rewards of stepping into our heart virtue lighten and soon erase the grief that comes with such great change. It does take a leap of faith to enter a new world. It's like a bird that remains in a cage even when the door is opened. We may discover a new freedom, but our comfort zone may be more important to us. I have a client, Claire, who is a former hippie. She went to live in a large commune in the Midwest almost 25 years ago as a teenager. In this commune, she had many long relationships with people who shared her love of living in community. As I worked with Claire, she discovered her heart virtue, which was connection through self-expression. When Claire began to live in alignment with this heart virtue, she entered a new world of laws, and it confused her tribe. She was getting results in ways that didn't make sense to them, calling on forces they couldn't see, and relying on protections they didn't know about. She began living a life of faith in her heart virtue rather than faith in her tribe. That looks very different. Today, Claire is experiencing a permanent sense of confidence because she can honestly say, my life is an expression of what is most meaningful to me, not others. Claire is now living outside of the commune and directing a children's theater group. She had to pass through a certain level of grief and loss as her old relationships ended or became more distant, and she embarked on a new way of life. This grieving process is very common for these heroes and very natural. It is not only grieving the loss of the old convenient relationships, which fall away as true friendships are formed. It is also grieving the loss of one's old self. Living every hour of every day with a safe and agreeable self is exchanged for a passionate relationship with a new friend. Our new self is willing to take risks several times a day to express our heart virtue as a contribution to others. Once we've experienced this new self, it's so fulfilling and so natural that we realize we will never go back to being our old self, merely being normal. And when someone is gone forever, there is a funeral and grieving. I often draw a picture of a doorway and say, everyone who has made this transition has to walk through this door, and the door is labeled Fool. One way to communicate our heart virtue beautifully is to volunteer to be like the court jester, who in the times of kings was the only one who could tell the embarrassing truths. The king told these truths and his tribe didn't like it, they poisoned him. And if anyone else in the king's court told these awkward and potentially implicating truths, they were obliged to be beheaded. Consequently, communication sucked and kingdoms were easy to infiltrate. Enter the court jester, entertaining master of uninhibited communication. We dressed up this one person as a fool, and he became our networking hub, because if someone doesn't speak the truth, the kingdom crumbles. Each kingdom had one guy who told the truth and did so in an entertaining way with jokes, songs, riddles, and skits. If the fool says something to challenge the king, everyone says he's just a fool. What he says doesn't matter, and so the court jester is spared. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King all look like fools to their tribes in the beginning when they stepped through that doorway. They were willing to say to their tribe, here's who I've been pretending to be, but here's who I really am, and here's my truth. We want to know the outcome first, and then we're willing to step through the doorway. Unfortunately, we will not know what our life can be like until we step through the doorway. If I ask you what an orange is, you could describe it, but when you taste it, that is a different experience from simply understanding what it is. Stepping through the door is tasting a new reality, and you can't get it before you've experienced it, no matter how hard you try to understand, because it's not reasonable, it's experiential. Once you do step through the doorway, you'll have an experience, and from that experience, you'll understand and be able to choose a new direction in your life. We want to do it this way. 1, show me the plan. 2, then I'll understand. 3, then I'll know the experience. And 4, then I'll take action. In other words, we want passionate feelings to come before we take action. But this is the way it works better. 1, show me the plan. 2, then I'll take action. 3, then I'll have an experience. 4, then I'll understand. In other words, passionate feelings come from taking action. Note the difference between the understanding in the first approach compared to the understanding in the second. One is intellectual, and the other is from experience. Which approach would you choose for your life? You may not feel like being courageous, but if you take courageous action, you will feel like it.